Denver District Attorney Beth McCann and her guests are here today to discuss their partnership to offer pretrial services to Denver veterans who find themselves defendants in the criminal justice system. On this edition of Dialogue Denver DA.
The Denver District Attorney is a state of Colorado office elected by Denver voters. The two primary goals of the Denver District Attorney are prosecuting criminals to the fullest extent possible and protecting the rights and interests of innocent victims. None of the numbers add up. The numbers don't add up. I don't have any records of that account anymore.
Let me refer you to someone who can help. I've got him on the line.
Thank you.
You can't keep up with me.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Case closed.
Hello everyone, I'm Tamara Banks and welcome to this edition of Dialogue Denver DA. Beth, always great to see you.
Thank you, my pleasure.
We have some pretty incredible guests who are doing amazing work in the community. Allow me to introduce to you first Greg Morrow, Director of the Denver Division of Community Corrections, and Holden Young, Veteran Resource Manager of Volunteers of America, Bill Daniels Veteran Services Center. They're here to discuss the partnership with the pretrial services here in Denver for veterans. So before we go into the deep dive, Beth, first tell me why it's important to have these programs for our veterans.
So we're seeing that veterans do sometimes get involved in the criminal justice system. And sometimes that's a result of something that may have happened to them while they were in the service, or when they get back to the United States, difficulty readjusting back into society. So I feel that it's important that we in the criminal justice system pay special attention to these usually young men and women and help them find resources to help them reintegrate into society when they are starting to get involved in the criminal justice system.
And some people might say, hey, they committed a crime, that you should be incarcerated, at least prosecuted, put on probation or something. But you say that maybe that's not always the proper reaction.
So we look at, the kinds of crimes that are committed, and depending on the nature of the crime, a determination's made whether or not they would be appropriate for kind of a pre-trial service. They are being charged with crimes, but what we're looking at is what's an appropriate disposition and how can we help them not reoffend. If we just put them in the system, maybe they go spend some time in jail, they get out, they get right back into the behavior that they had previously been in. This program is really geared toward helping them find other ways to live and be successful. So that's why it's really important for us to be looking at how can we break the cycle, so prevention of crime as well as prosecution.
So Greg, let me ask you, what are the pretrial services and what do they do, what do they entail?
Sure. So first let me explain maybe the context of the pretrial stage of a case. It occurs shortly after the arrest and booking of a defendant into the jail, all the way through disposition. So there's the filing of charges and then there are multiple court appearances that occur. And so pretrial services exist to really assist the court with that initial bail setting shortly after arrest, where we provide information to allow that judge to make an informed decision about the release or detention of that individual and what conditions, if released, that person will be held and monitored by pretrial services.
So what are some of the factors that the pretrial process goes through to create an opportunity for the veterans?
Sure. So after someone is booked into the jail, we meet with them. We ask them several questions. We compile a full criminal history. The nature of the charges are included in the bond report that goes to the court. And then we're also administering actuarial risk assessment tools, which really complete the package and allow that judge to have a full picture of the risk that individual poses and what services might be best to make that person successful, not only during pretrial, but post-disposition as well.
So Holden, tell me a little bit about how your program fits into all this.
A big part of what we do is provide peer mentor services for the veterans. It's kind of based around the idea that guys who are judicially involved can relate better to other guys that have been through similar circumstances, have been through deployments, have been through war. The overall arching idea being that these guys, with help of their fellow veterans, can help one another out of the situation they're in, just like they would on the battlefield or any other place.
I bet there's some pretty amazing success stories that come out of that, just having a fellow brother or sister to talk to.
Yes.
Anything come to mind to you?
I mean, I hear success stories a lot, and the overall arching theme is that they were just happy to have somebody there, happy to have somebody that they could relate to, and happy to have somebody that was standing alongside them through this process.
So Beth, I imagine there has to be a referral process. I mean, not every veteran might qualify for this, is that right?
So that's part of what Greg's folks do, is they look at kind of a comprehensive view of the person. And the assessment tools he talked about are important because they do help us decide whether or not someone is a risk to stay out in the public, and whether they are likely to skip and not show up for court again. So, so all of that is taken into account. And of course, the deputy DAs that are in the courtroom take a look at that and can express an opinion to the court whether or not they agree that someone would be appropriate for pretrial release, and what kind of programs or monitoring might be helpful or appropriate for that person. So, so we're involved in helping make that determination. But one of my goals, I think we've talked about, is trying to really look at putting the right people in jail and not just putting people in jail, but really trying to determine who can benefit from being out in the community and who, on the other hand, really presents a danger and shouldn't be out in the public. So that's an analysis that we go through every day. But I think with veterans, we are saying there may be some other things at play here. You know, men and women who've been through combat, maybe 2 or 3 tours of duty, may really have some trauma, have had trauma associated with that and are still suffering from that kind of trauma, or they may self-medicate. I think that's a pretty common reaction, drinking too much, maybe doing drugs, to sort of get away from that, what they've seen and heard in war. So I think they do present a little bit different kind of analysis that we want to make sure we take into account.
Right, absolutely. I'm going to throw some acronyms at you. Maybe you can help me figure out what they are. So what do the CPAT and ODERA predict? First of all, what do those acronyms stand for?
We'll give that to Greg.
I'll take that one. So we'll start with the CPAT. It's the acronym for the Colorado Pretrial Assessment Tool, and it's one of the 2 instruments that we administer to folks coming into the jail to help give us predictive, it helps predict who's going to appear in court and who might be rearrested during the pretrial period of the case. So that's one of the risk assessment tools. The ODARA stands for the Ontario Domestic Assault Risk Assessment, and what it helps us predict is who's at high risk to commit a new domestic violence case over the next foreseeable future. So in combination, those 2 tools, along with criminal history, the nature of the offense, the professional judgment by the attorneys and the judge, that kind of to Beth's point about trying to jail the right people, all that information is available now. And if I can just speak for a moment of some significant changes that's happening in pretrial, not only here in Denver, but in Colorado and across the country, is this shift away from what has been described as a resource-based system, where what led to the release of individuals from jail was really their ability to pay a financial condition of bond and be released, versus our new system of a risk-informed decision, where that judge has the ability to look at these risk assessments and make solid decisions on who gets released and under what conditions.
So let me jump back over to you, Holden. Talk a little bit about how Volunteers of America, Bill Daniels Veterans Center, Services Center, really ties this all together.
The Veterans Service Center is designed to be a kind of a one-stop location for veterans accessing services. A large part of what I do in my position is to identify gaps in services in the building that veterans wish they could get access to. A big part of that is peer services. And so at the Bill Daniels Veterans Service Center, we're building up our staff of peer mentors to be able to go out and outreach to these guys, to be able to say, hey, I'm here to help you through this time. I'm a good resource to be able to help you navigate all the things that are available to veterans in the state of Colorado.
So do you physically, when you say outreach, are you actually out
Yes, ma'am.
and about?
Yes.
So where are veterans who need assistance?
They're all across the state. We target areas where we know veterans go to most often, places like VFWs, American Legions. We also target other service providers across the area like the VA Hospital, Denver Vet Center, places like that. We really try to be strategic about where we go to outreach to these guys and say, hey, we're here, we're available to us, we just want to help you out.
So why don't you just rely on them coming to you?
Because a lot of times I think veterans are prideful, and rightfully so. There's a stigma surrounding mental health and getting this kind of help in general in our nation. And so reaching out for that kind of help is sometimes hard for these veterans. When we break an arm or break a leg, we know to go to the hospital, but it's not the same thing when you're talking about post-traumatic stress or traumatic brain injuries. It's kind of a totally different animal. It's an injury you can't really see, and a lot of guys either don't want to admit that they're at that point where they need help, or they think they can handle it on their own. We just want to be able to be out there and be like, hey, we're here, we're available, we're just trying to help out.
I think you, or somebody talked about other services available. And so what other kinds of things might people need? And would they, I think you mentioned one-stop shopping. Is everything there in the building rather than having to go to this building for, say, mental help, and then someplace else to get your meds, and then someplace else to get, treatment for a bad hip? I mean, it sounds like it's kind of, like I said, one-stop shopping.
Yes, and that's kind of how it's designed to be. We don't want to be sending guys across town to different appointments or say, hey, you need this kind of form, you'll have to go back later and come back. A lot of the veterans we see on a regular basis are in crisis. They need things like housing services or employment services or connection to VA benefits or even just food and clothing sometimes. And we provide all of that at the Bill Daniels Veterans Service Center. We have all those things there so that the men and women who served our country don't have to be told to go someplace else or don't have to be told to call a number and wait for that person to call you back. They can walk in through the door and get access to the services they deserve.
And one last question before we go to break. Where is it located?
The Bill Daniels Veterans Service Center is on 1247 Santa Fe. That's right on North Santa Fe between 12th and 13th Avenue.
So near mass transportation.
Yep.
Bus stops.
Bus stop comes right to 12th Avenue, right there, 12th Street.
Great.
Yep.
Okay. Well, we've got lots more to talk about. Stay right there. We're here with Denver DA Beth McCann on Dialogue Denver DA. Back in a moment. Welcome back, everyone, to Dialogue Denver DA. I'm Tamara Banks, and this is the portion of the program where we talk about our legal term. And today our legal term is accessory. And what that means, it's a person who knowingly and intentionally helps someone else commit a crime, either before by engaging the crime or after, encouraging the crime, I should say, or after by concealing the crime. So this is, Beth, to elaborate on somebody who just sort of helped the crime happen or helped them
Right.
cover it up.
Yes. So often we will charge accessory against someone who, for example, takes the bloody clothes and disposes of them or helps to dispose of them, or gets rid of other evidence. Or it can be the driver of a car in the getaway car. So there are a number of situations where we would charge someone as an accessory to a crime.
Gotcha. So back to the conversation at hand here, we're talking about veterans and the assistance that's available throughout Denver. We were talking about, getting ready to talk about the number of homeless veterans. That's a large number.
Yes, the Denver Post reported that Colorado has had the largest spike in homeless veterans of any other state over the last year and a half, 2 years. And we don't know exactly why, but we are seeing a larger population of homeless veterans. We have almost as many as New York State, which is really
Wow.
amazing and sad.
Yeah, yeah. And maybe the marijuana brings them here, the weather.
Yeah, I think he did some interviews. Kirk Mitchell did the article, did some interviews, and some of them talked about coming here to work in the marijuana industry. But the problem with that is that you have to be a resident of Colorado for a year before you can be hired in the marijuana industry. So that doesn't work.
Right.
But we do have a great economy, so some of them are able to find jobs and some aren't. So they end up here, and then the cost of living is so high, cost of housing is high, so they aren't able to find a place to live.
So Holden, let me jump back with you. Why partner with the Denver DA's office?
I mean, it just makes sense. If we're trying to reach guys who are justice involved and make sure that they're getting access to the services they deserve and make sure that they're getting access, especially to peer mentors, we want to be able to do that as early and as soon as possible in their judicial involvement.
I guess that kind of makes sense too with your organization, Greg.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it's all about helping that individual become successful. I mean, I think the Denver DA's office deserves a lot of credit for coming up with this concept, and Volunteers of America, they're doing all the heavy lifting. We're the conduit. We try to connect to services, but all the great work is really being done at the VOA.
Well, it makes sense to, so often you hear organizations sort of having the same audience, if you will, or the same clients, but they're working separately. They're working in silos. And can you just talk about how effective it is to really work as a team in sort of a multi-pronged approach to helping veterans get back on their feet?
So I'll start with our perspective. It absolutely makes sense to connect to services in the community. So the mutual goal we have is client success, and so our case managers are able to also get support through services at VOA to help make that client successful. And instead of us trying to do it all alone and send people to 9 different locations across town, the fact that services are co-located at one facility or one stop really makes a lot of sense for us.
Yeah, I think a big part of making sure that guys aren't reoffending, to reduce the recidivism rate, is to get them connected with peer mentors as soon as possible. Obviously, we're about serving veterans and we're about helping them in any possible way we can. But it also makes sense too for the taxpayer to not be able to waste their money on guys that are constantly coming back in the judicial system. If we can get them connected early and get them as help as soon as possible, it's a win-win for everybody.
What happens if a veteran declines help or declines authorization to be helped? What can you do? Can you do anything?
Persistence.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is letting them know that we're there. It's not necessarily, having them say yes every time you reach out to them for help. It's just the fact that they know that you're there to help them out.
And in the criminal system, if they do get on probation or as part of their pretrial services, there can be conditions put on that. So a condition could be that they participate and cooperate with the VOA services. And if they don't, then there's a consequence. So the criminal system does provide a little more of a hammer, if you will, or a way to monitor, so we can keep track of their participation and encourage them to keep participating, because the alternative might be going to spend a few days in jail.
Right. Some cities have veterans courts. Does Denver have something like that, or is that something on the way?
We don't. It's something that I talked about when I was campaigning, because I am interested in whether or not that would be something we'd want to pursue here. We, as I mentioned, have this track in our drug court, but that's only for people that end up being charged with a drug offense and end up in drug court. But now through this process, we actually are making services available to all kinds of crimes, not just drug crimes. But it's something to look at. El Paso County has one, Arapahoe has one, and Jefferson County have separate veterans courts. So it's something that we're looking at, but we're not ready to actually open that kind of a court yet.
I imagine it takes a lot of support, and it's always about money
Right.
and people taking down those silos so that you can actually work together, as we just mentioned here earlier. So I'm curious, what does success look like? We've talked in previous mayoral administrations where we're going to get rid of homelessness forever, or we're going to knock out poverty, or whatever the case may be. Maybe I'll ask each of you. Beth, I'll start with you. What does
Well,
success look
since I'm in the criminal justice business, success to me is someone who doesn't come back, who I never see again, right? Someone who started to get involved in the criminal system and has gotten some support and help, and they are on their way to be productive, healthy citizens.
Yeah. How about you, Holden?
Connection to services. I think the ultimate success for us is just making sure that the men and women that went out there and served our country have the connection to the services and are aware of the things that they've earned through that service to our country. It may seem like a real simple thing, but I think having a veteran knowing that there's other people out there that are standing alongside them, that they're helping, and that they have been connected to the things that they're eligible for makes all the difference in the world.
I would agree with what Holden said, connection to services. Obviously, if that occurs, we're likely to see the ultimate goal of that person not coming back through the criminal justice system. But you can even achieve some small wins by that connection of services.
Like many things, I think of, so you're there, the veteran's there, he or she is receiving help, mental assistance, emotional support, connection, but then they go back home, wherever home is, and they may not have that same sort of support at home. Do you also have programs or outreach or some sort of support for the families and the loved ones that are involved with the veteran?
We do. A lot of our programs at the Bill Daniels Veteran Service Center are not only catered to the veterans, but also catered to the spouses, to the children of these veterans, the things that affect them most. We partner across the metro area, partner across the state of Colorado with a lot of organizations that provide services just like you were mentioning.
And I think it's important to say again that it's not just about drugs, it's about other crimes that could develop outside of that situation. Beth, can you talk a little bit about how important as your office, the district attorney's office, to have these kinds of organizations part of the system here in Denver, so that you don't have all these cases that you need to prosecute, that you actually have people that you're actually helping?
It's critical. That's really my vision for criminal justice, is that we are able to really look at each individual case and figure out what's an appropriate resolution here. Does this person need to go through the system and end up possibly in prison, or are there other ways we can handle that particular individual to help them not get in the criminal system again? So I think the more we can be aware of and partner with outside groups, the more successful we will all be. And I think particularly with veterans, because there are support groups out there for veterans, but we don't always know about them. So it's nice to have this connection that sort of provides a lot of services, one-stop shopping, as Holden said. So it's important.
How many people can the organization serve?
A lot. We see on average now about 700 to 750 different veterans come in a month to the Veterans Service Center. So we have capacity to serve as many that want to come in and get access to services.
And how is it funded?
A lot of our programs are federally funded. We do have some smaller programs in the building that are funded by private foundations or donors, but a majority of them are funded federally.
I want to ask the two of you, why did you get involved with veterans specifically? I mean, with your talents, you could be working with any population. Greg, I'll start with you.
Well, I mean, honestly, this process really developed from the district attorney's office in combination with the pretrial supervisor over the intake department in my shop. So it was an easy idea to support. I mean, to one, connect people to services, to try to provide success for people who've served our country, I think is admirable. So it was easy to get behind the idea. But again, I would throw it back to Holden, who does all the heavy lifting on this project.
I come from a large family of veterans, and I kind of saw how over the years it affected them each individually, and I just kind of felt a calling to be able to help the men and women out that sacrifice so much for us.
Yeah, it's one of those things where that seems like a no-brainer to be able to contribute back to folks who've paid the ultimate sacrifice.
Absolutely.
Beth, any closing thoughts?
Well,
remarks?
one thing we haven't touched on exactly is the whole domestic violence component, because we do see domestic violence sometimes among veterans and veterans' families. And if we can connect them to services to help restore that family unit and help them get that support, it's life-changing for them and for their families, because the stress and the post-traumatic stress and sometimes the brain injury really does affect the whole family. And if we can help them restore their family situation, it really does make a difference, and then we don't see them again.
Right.
And that's really the ultimate goal.
And like you said, it affects the entire family, which means it affects the entire community.
Yes.
So if it's going to have that domino effect, it might as well be a positive effect.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much for being here. Such a pleasure to meet you and learn such amazing work that you're doing. Keep up the great work. Thank you to District Attorney Beth McCann, to Greg Morrow, Director of the Denver Division of Community Corrections, and to Holden Young, Veteran Resource Manager, Volunteers of America, Bill Daniels Veterans Services Center, for today's informative discussion of their efforts to guide Denver's veterans who find themselves in the criminal justice system to find help. We'll see you next time.